If there's one thing we have learned about the people who make the rules, it's that they have no intention of following them. Any of them.
Tonight, news on the Colorado River. The warning from federal authorities just today that we're at a tipping point, in their words, saying historic water cuts to multiple states are now possible.
A blazing alarm to change our relationship with water. The 40 million Americans who rely on the Colorado River are facing the prospect of their water running dry. And tonight, farmers are worried about their livelihoods for good reason.
The federal government expected to restrict Arizona's water supply even more in the coming months.
The mega drought in the western U.S. is so severe, it's making history.
The 3-decade drought is shrinking the Colorado River, and there's no end in sight.
Western states are experiencing the worst mega drought in at least 1,200 years.
Arizona is in the midst of a worsening water crisis.
Our drought is bad enough. It's been going on for a good couple of years now. But then look at Lake Mead. The drought out west, that's in year 23. Some are concerned their problem could become our problem.
All right, let's move on now to light rail. You want to triple light rail. Why?
Well, we have to.
That when it comes to funding, you can either fund this light rail expansion and the street and bus improvement, or you can address aging infrastructure, roads and sewers, water lines. They all need help now. That also indicates a major American city moving forward.
Sure. This is a city, when it comes to our water infrastructure, one of the things you brought up, we have an excellent water infrastructure.
Let's talk about how the city can afford it, because critics say you can't.
Silence and money. From pennies to dollars, any amount will do. Cha-ching, cha-ching, it's no contest. There's only one thing that I love the best.
Now the city has $1 million more to spend from a federal grant. They say will help complete a long-term plan aiming to revitalize South Phoenix.
Critics say that the taxpayers subsidize and pay for 78% of light rail operations, and yet only 2 to 4% of folks in the city, in the region, use light rail. They don't see the balance there. Do you see the balance there?
Of course. Look, light rail has been a massive success.
After months of negotiations, Democrats pulled this infrastructure bill over the finish line.
This afternoon, Mayor Kate Gallego, Democrat Senators Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema, along with Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, touting the new $1 trillion infrastructure bill. The bipartisan bill also includes improvements to Arizona's water systems, roads, bridges, and light rail.
$884 million over 5 years to improve public transportation. $619 million to improve water infrastructure. $17 million will go towards helping protect against cyber attacks.
Now, this bill is a lot to digest. This is all 2,700 pages of it. It weighs 28 pounds, and the people who know what's in it and understand it are the politicians who voted for it.
We asked Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg directly.
Even though these are enormous dollar sums, they can go very quickly if you're not watching to make sure that they're used in the best possible way.
But you're willing and ready to be held accountable.
It's part of the job, and that's something that we accept, the administration accepts.
It's about building back up our infrastructure in a way that we leapfrog. So it's not just about repair, it's about building things. It's about fixing things and building things. We talk about water policy. Water policy, to do better, well, we need to construct places where we capture water, places where we store water. And here's the other thing, because I also, I'm in a lot of meetings on foreign policy. You know, for years and generations, wars have been fought over oil. In a short matter of time, they will be fought over water. So when we think about building up our economy around our infrastructure on something like water policy, it's literally about jobs, it's about the fundamental source of life, it will sustain life, and it's about strengthening up our nation around a commodity that is a precious commodity. But it's also about investing in resilience. It's about investing in adaptation, diversifying water policy in a way we are thinking about the storage of water both above ground and underground. We're thinking about recycling and all that we know is available to us to actually be smarter in terms of the conservation of this diminishing and valuable resource called water.
Spoke a lot of conservation, and it seems like we're focusing a lot on homes. So wondering if, off the top of your heads, you have a sense of water usage, homes versus commercial or corporations?
With our extremely large customers, we're engaged with them and working with them to work on recycling. What we find in some of these industries is if we can treat the water and reuse it on site, that they can put that back and recycle it over and over again, therefore reducing their water footprint.
We're in a drought this bad after 1,200 years. Lake Mead is at 31% capacity, Lake Powell is at 24%, all of that. The actions that we're going to take for stage one with large-scale long-term effort. I guess it would be helpful to get a little bit more explanation. I think when you hear the context, it all sounds very doom and gloom and terrifying. And you know, why we're not taking a little bit more proactive and maybe just more extreme action and maybe bigger actions. I know Las Vegas, for example, has looked at banning grass lawns, which makes a big difference. Grass lawns.
The U.S. Forest Service will award more than $1 billion in grants to help cities and towns plant trees that in the long term will help repel the heat and expand access to green spaces.
What did he say?
Green spaces, so families have a place to go to cool off and to bring down the temperature in cities.
We talked a little bit about industrial and the fact that industrial uses account for 5 to 6% of water use. And that really struck a chord with me because I feel, you know, obviously in District 7, we have a lot of industrial, a lot of zoning for industrial. We know that industrial uses are a significant source of our pollution in the city. It's wreaking havoc on neighborhoods. We're having so many fires as well as a result. And then they are also big water users, as it turns out. So could we look at potential zoning changes or restrictions or more just enforcement around industrial uses? And there's a lot of zoning out there for more industrial along the Rio, along a lot of places it shouldn't be. And if it's also a water issue, I'm just wondering if we can kind of, it's not really a question, but more of a, you know, is this something that you think we can look into, how we can look at industrial uses and maybe, you know, being a little bit more selective about adding more and enforcing the ones that already do exist?
As you can see on this slide, there are various efforts that we're going to be utilizing to communicate with our customers, and so that effectively allowing them to hear this message. This will range from a contract that we are getting to get media campaigns, either outdoor and on digital, as well as door hangers, When we see our staff sees, our city staff sees water wasting that's happening out in the community, to be able to communicate with the customers about that water wasting.
We also have a very strong commitment to investing in infrastructure, because with water being such a precious resource, you can't afford to not invest in infrastructure and then waste water. And so we have a very robust investment in infrastructure that's proactive, trying to get ahead of things. We also have a culture of water conservation. That is where we have worked with our customers over our history to really understand that they are desert dwellers and to live in a way that recognizes that and the place of water as a very scarce and precious resource.
And today I am declaring a stage 1 water alert. The city will ask the customers to voluntarily evaluate and reduce their water use. A Stage 1 water alert is a way for the City of Phoenix to signal to its customers that we face challenges with one of our water resources, the Colorado River. And we are calling on our customers to take an active approach to responsible water use. And we are calling on our customers to take an active approach to responsible water use. But we are going to increase water conservation efforts.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. It's my pleasure to talk to you today about our work on conservation. I think it's very important that before we ask our citizens to do anything, the city lead by example in its own operations, and I'm proud to say that the city has done so. Water budget calculator. The fact of the matter is that most folks, when they water their yard, don't know how much water they actually need to apply to their yard. What the water budget calculator does is allows you to put in some basic numbers about what your yard looks like and tells you exactly how much water you need to be applying every single month. And then you can take that information and either guide it as you water with a hose or as you use your irrigation controller to try to couple those pieces together. If a employee were to see some water misuse, whether that's spraying on the sidewalk, if a employee were to see some water misuse, whether that's spraying on the sidewalk, if a employee were to see some water misuse, whether that's spraying on the sidewalk or a broken valve, we could simply place this door hanger on their door so that they could be aware of the potential waste that they're having.
One of the things I did learn in the last month is that most of us overwash our dishes and that you can more easily just put them in the dishwasher, which will be more efficient. So I feel like that's some good news for everyone. And that also, as Dr. Wilson said, there's a lot of opportunities to save water use outdoors, which is for us where the bulk of it is. So opportunities to help the environment and help your bottom line. And we'll hope to continue to support the water department in sharing those messages about how we can conserve water in our desert environment.
And very excited and proud of the water conservation requirements. So do want to thank Mayor Gallego for your leadership on that.
You, if elected, would have to deal with this existential threat to our water supply. Explain the problem to the average voter. What do they need to know about the issue and how urgently the state needs to act?
It is incredibly urgent. I was just saying we have to really innovate in how we're conserving water on a large scale because the water is continuing to run dry in the Colorado River and Lake Mead and Lake Powell, and we need to be aggressive and innovative in how we look at increasing water supply. And that means projects that are shovel ready now, not something like desalination that's going to take 10 years to even get off the ground.
Talk about me as a water consumer. Using water to cook, using water to bathe. Should I be conserving more? Cities right now have put in place some conservation measures. They seem to be baby steps. Would you recommend as governor more aggressive individual conservation?
I think everyone can play their part, and we can do more to ensure that people are playing their part on a voluntary basis. But there are larger users of water than households, and we need to be much more aggressive in those areas.
Your state is in the midst of an unprecedented drought. The federal government just announced new restrictions that are going to cut Arizona's supply of the water from the Colorado River by 21%. What will those cuts mean for Arizonans, and will they actually do anything to address the core problem here, which is that there simply isn't enough water?
You know, the state's working together to come up with a plan to deal with this unprecedented drought. We took cuts when Lake Mead fell below 1,075 feet above sea level, and now again below 1,050 feet. So, you know, we were anticipating this, and the states worked together on this plan. And you're right, we have this climate crisis that is affecting water in the West, and these reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, have gotten to what are now historically low levels. And the rate of decline is such that we have to do more. But the Colorado River is a good amount of our water. It's important for agriculture. It's important for, you know, communities across the state. But, you know, we're good at solving, you know, hard problems, and we're going to work our way through this one.
So the Biden administration is currently warning that this drought could lead to a, quote, catastrophic collapse of the Colorado River system, which, as you note, is a critical water source for not just Arizona, but the entire region. So far, the Biden administration has largely left this issue to the states to resolve. And here's what you had to say about this issue back in June.
Arizona's done everything that Arizona has been asked, and we're going to continue to step up here. But we need partners and long-term commitments from the federal government, because this is a basin-wide problem, not just an Arizona problem.
I mean, it's an existential crisis for your state and others, as I don't need to tell you. Is the Biden administration being too passive, too cautious?
Well, first of all, it's not existential. So we do have the tools in place. What we don't have is the partnership right now with other states. And it's so important that the other states step up and do something about it. It just can't be on the state of Arizona.
And do everything we can to prepare for the drought.
And the situation on the Colorado River in terms of the water supply has been explained to me as dire by water policy experts. What else is the city of Phoenix doing to prepare?
We are trying to invest throughout the city in a variety of infrastructure projects. We're also trying to educate our residents about how they can prepare.
And what are some of the ways that we can all help our water supply? Because this can be, stressful, really, to think about water as such a crucial part of our everyday life.
We have a great educational series that's on our Phoenix YouTube station, and we would encourage people to check that out. There's information in your water bill. The majority of residential water use is outside. So if you can take a look at your landscaping, that's probably the biggest impact. You can take a look at your landscaping. That's probably the biggest impact.
And we are looking forward to applying for the funding for trees. And we are looking forward to applying for the funding for trees, which could really go a long way in making our communities more comfortable, that you have secured in the Inflation Reduction Act.
And the international effort, we've got a commitment to, plant 1 billion trees over the next several years worldwide. I mean, there's a reason why. Anyway, you guys get it.
If you look out 2 years, Lake Powell could go so low that it's essentially dry.
Tom Bishatsky runs Arizona's water department.
What that would mean if we hit that is no water in the river through the Grand Canyon.
For starters, he says, temporary drastic cuts are needed to stabilize the system. But even then, the reduced flow of the river is unlikely to change.
The Colorado River system provides water to 40 million people across the West, from Denver to LA to Mexico. But after more than 2 decades of drought, water levels have reached historic lows, and competition for the remaining water between countries, between states, even between neighbors, is growing fierce.
To understand what faces the West, consider some basic math. By law, 7 states and Mexico are allocated in total 16.5 million acre-feet of Colorado River water each year. But these days, only about 11 million acre-feet are actually flowing. And so the big collection points of the river, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, are draining like bathtubs.
Prolonged drought afflicting the West is one of the most significant challenges facing our communities and our country.
Failure to ease water use risks not only the loss of the river, but energy production and, according to a senior administration official, uncertainty and conflict. We have reported on the historic lows of reservoirs across the West, especially Lake Powell and Lake Mead.
Over the past 2 decades, the water level here at Lake Mead has decreased by 130 feet. That's basically a 13-story building. And when you're up close, you can see how gigantic those bathtub rings really are.
Lake Mead at 37% capacity then, now just 27%.
Longest lasting mega drought was in the late 1500s, and it was kind of equal to the one we're in right now. But now they've said we've surpassed it, unfortunately, and it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon.
Lake Powell, the second largest man-made reservoir in the country, is drying up. Now, if water levels at the lake drop another 32 feet, all hydroelectric production would stop at the reservoir's Glen Canyon Dam. Now, the Interior Department is now facing a difficult decision: save water or electricity. Imagine that choice. Now, the crisis is forcing government officials to take drastic measures to keep both power and water flowing to Americans in the West.
But the view from above, going back 20 years, is alarming. There are 7 boat launches going into Lake Mead. At least there were. 6 of them are officially closed because the water's gotten so low. This one on the north end of the lake is now nowhere near the water. We walked it. What for decades was the bottom of the lake is now parched desert. Still not there. It took 29 minutes on foot, which turned out to be at least a mile to the water now. The Hoover Dam was built during the Great Depression. Lake Mead filled to about 1,200 feet above sea level. All the way until the year 2000, it fluctuated, but stayed around that 1,200-foot level. But in the last 23 years, it's dropped, and dropped, and dropped again. Now down to a record low at about 1,050 feet. If it drops another 100 feet, it would no longer power the dam, and about 50 feet below that is what's known as dead pool, where the water will no longer pass through the dam.
In August, the federal government declared the first ever water shortage for the lower Colorado River Basin. The drought so bad, communities must now prepare to ration water.
A lot of people say, okay, great, we've had a wet year, but the drought situation continues and we've got a water shortage. State of California offering a counter proposal.
What's at stake? Keeping the Colorado River alive for 40 million people living downstream. And arguing about it isn't getting anyone anywhere.
At the same time, you might be in a court arguing the river is still drying up.
The two sets of plans basically agree with the feds on cutting the Colorado River usage by about 15 to 25%, but differ on which state should share the bigger burden. Tom Bushatsky is fighting for Arizona.
We will do our best to find a collaborative solution among all 7 states, but not at the expense of Arizona being unfairly cut.
California sees it differently, willing to make cuts now and maybe more if and when things get worse, but at about 1/3 less than its smaller cousin to the east, Arizona.
The California proposal assigns shortages to a degree, but then acknowledges that deeper cuts may be necessary, but those specific allocations of those shortages will have to be figured out in the coming months.
The 6 other states want things like seepage and evaporation included as factors in their cutbacks, but also want California, which uses the most water, to conserve the most water.
We will be continuing to be at the negotiating table trying to hammer out what those reductions look like and how we share in those reductions.
The feds haven't tipped their hand or offered much advice on this yet, but they're expected to come up with their own solutions this summer if all 7 states don't do it first.
We're out here in the middle of the Arizona desert during one of the worst mega droughts of the past 1,200 years. So you might be surprised to know that a Saudi Arabian-owned company is being allowed to use these pumps to pump unlimited amounts of groundwater to irrigate farm fields in the desert and grow one of the most water-intensive crops there is, alfalfa. So what is this company doing with all of this alfalfa? Well, they're putting it on trucks, then they put it on trains, then they put it on ships, and they send it back to the Middle East. So why are they growing these crops out here in Arizona instead of back home? Well, it's illegal to grow a crop like alfalfa in Saudi Arabia because it uses too much water.
La Paz County Supervisor Holly Irwin has been sounding the alarm about these foreign-owned farms since they began operating here in 2015.
Why would a company from Saudi Arabia be growing alfalfa in the Arizona desert?
Because they've depleted their natural resource over there. So now they're here.
So Fondamonte bought vast tracts of desert in western Arizona on top of a massive groundwater aquifer, in part because there are no regulations on how much water can be pumped out of the ground.
So anybody can come out here and buy or lease land, and if you can put a well in and you can find water, you can take it.
That's right.
But what it's doing here is not illegal. In fact, the state of Arizona itself is renting this particular piece of land to Fondamonte for just $25 an acre. It can then pump unlimited amounts of groundwater for essentially no cost. CBS News obtained copies of several land leases dating back to 2014 that give Fondamonte rights to more than 6,000 acres of state-owned land and the groundwater that comes with it. The leases are signed by Arizona's State Land Department. We asked the department why it granted the leases, but it did not respond to our multiple requests for comment. Most state officials in charge when the leases were signed are no longer in office. The state doesn't even know exactly how much water the foreign farms are using. She says canceling the leases is an urgent concern because groundwater in this valley is supposed to be the state's emergency water supply during a water crisis.
This is water that Phoenix is about to need.
We have two calamities, the mega drought, and we have the calamity created by state legislature, which permitted dry lot subdivisions. They're building homes with no water.
Scottsdale Mayor David Ortega says he made the decision to protect his own constituents in a time of severe, persistent drought.
This is why the noise from Rio Verde was so minuscule compared to what I deal with every day, and the other mayors deal with, of Phoenix, Mesa, and so forth. So it is a race.
Scottsdale's population of 250,000 relies on the Colorado River for the majority of its water, and the mayor is preparing for the federal government to cut up to 40% of the city's current allotment in the next year.
The entire state of Arizona, and Scottsdale in particular, are going to have to go on a water diet.
But after more than 2 decades of drought, water levels have reached historic lows, and competition for the remaining water between countries, between states, even between neighbors is growing fierce.
One community outside Scottsdale, Rio Verde Foothills, used to get its water from Scottsdale, but the city has its own shortage concerns and is no longer supplying Rio Verde with water.
Scottsdale Mayor David Ortega likes to say that water isn't a compassion game.
We cannot afford the luxury of treating water as an emotional issue.
Ortega has demonstrated repeatedly that Rio Verde Foothills' lack of water isn't the city of Scottsdale's problem.
The margin for error in this drought-stricken state is very slim.
On January 1st, the nearby city of Scottsdale banned private companies from buying water at fill stations and transporting it outside of the city, leaving nearly 1,000 people in Rio Verde, an unincorporated suburb, without the water source they've relied on. Scottsdale blames what it calls Rio Verde's unlimited and unregulated growth, saying in part, Scottsdale has warned and advised that it is not responsible for Rio Verde for many years, especially given the requirements of the city's mandated drought plan.
The utility company EPCOR could send water through Scottsdale's system for Rio Verde's use. The catch is Scottsdale needs to agree.
We just hope that Mayor Ortega can help these folks in a spirit of cooperation now that the solution has been found to facilitate it.
I am not equivocating. That's not going to happen. They'll add another 1,000 homes out there. They'll think, well, Scottsdale has got to be compassionate and give us the... That's not good enough. They're going to have to find their own solution.
In a May 16th letter to EPCOR's executives, Ortega said he wanted nothing to do with Rio Verde Foothills. In the letter, obtained by 12 News through a public records request, Ortega said, the purpose of this letter is to affirm that the city of Scottsdale has no authority, no responsibility, no interest whatsoever in the unincorporated county areas abutting Scottsdale.
Ultimately, our water system is not at the disposal of entities, dummy corporations.
Politics of construction in Rio Verde. Even lots with no water are still guaranteed building permits by the pro-growth state government.
Do you anticipate there being other communities like that facing this in the years ahead?
Based on the pioneer attitude that still exists in Arizona, it's going to continue to happen.
The constant decline of the water source is reality.
Yeah.
We have to adapt, and then we have to adapt more, and we have to adapt more.
The town of Queen Creek celebrating today. A brand new water deal will help ensure that part of the valley will have enough water to continue record growth.
There are concerns this first-of-a-kind deal will have unintended consequences, turning desert water into a commodity bought and sold by Wall Street investment firms.
Big Wall Street investment firms are buying up pieces of Arizona desert, hoping to make big profits selling water to our growing valley. Today's deal is the first big example.
Now you've just opened up Pandora's box, and I'm already seeing it here in La Paz County with brokers that are inquiring about land up and down the Colorado River. They're just here to make, millions of dollars at our expense.
What she's talking about is Wall Street investment firms buying up land in the Arizona desert and next to the Colorado River. Not for farming or development, but for the purpose of selling the water rights to valley cities for a hefty profit. The owner of the water Queen Creek bought was not a small farmer, it was a large investment firm. So if these deals continue to happen, La Paz, Yuma, and Mojave counties could be looking at the real possibility of ending up with huge tracts of land that have very little water or no water at all attached to them. So they can't be farmed, and in some cases, they can't be developed either.
Yeah, you asked if this was the start of a trend. I mean, could this rush to invest in water end up impacting the prices consumers pay for water at home?
That's a big concern here. I mean, investment firms are looking to buy and sell water for a reason. They can make money on it. So absolutely, there's a good chance the water is going to become much more expensive with the more investment in the property, sort of with this market of trying to sell it.
Monetizing a priceless resource.
Yeah.
Hoy le vengo a contar acerca de algo que estamos sintiendo aquí y lo estamos sintiendo en todas partes. Es la falta de agua. Y eso no importa en dónde usted esté, esto le está afectando ya o le va a afectar en forma muy seria en el futuro. Por eso le vengo a contar el caso de la ciudad de Phoenix, en Arizona. Phoenix ya no puede seguir dando permisos para nuevas construcciones, para nuevas colonias, para nuevos suburbios, porque no va a tener agua para esas colonias. Entonces lo que están haciendo es buscando de dónde sacarlo. Y se les ocurrió que lo más inteligente era a través del vecino del estado de Sonora, llegando hasta el Mar de Cortés y tratando de extraer el agua del Mar de Cortés para llevarla a Phoenix, Arizona. Si ellos van a pagar, pues no hay ningún problema, este es un nuevo negocio y podría ser redituable. El problema es que por cada litro de agua que usted saca en un proceso de desalinización, hay otro litro de agua que se queda en algo que llaman salmuera, porque es algo insidioso, algo que hace mucho daño tanto al agua como a la tierra, porque son los restos de toda esa sal que ya se limpió y que se llevaron para otro lugar. Phoenix va a tener que pagar mucho más por esto y hay gente que en México está opuesta a que este proyecto se lleve a cabo porque dicen que el beneficio se viene a Estados Unidos mientras el perjuicio ecológico se queda en México. Eso hay que pensarlo. Ahora, el problema también está en el norte del país porque México ya no está recibiendo tanta agua como recibía de los Estados Unidos y del agua del río Colorado, porque simplemente no existe esa agua ya. Y Estados Unidos le está diciendo a México, no es que te la quiera quitar, es que no la tengo ya. Y estamos restringiendo el agua también en los estados que antes en la Unión Americana recibían esa agua.
Phoenix has been over 110 degrees for 27 straight days. And always have water with you. That sounds silly, but always have a bottle of water with you when you're outside. The construction workers who literally risk their lives working all day in blazing heat, and in some places don't even have the right to take a water break. That's outrageous. That is outrageous. Anybody who says that, does that.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
We're using a law I got passed the first day in office, first month in office, called the American Rescue Plan, to help states and cities promote energy efficiency, reduce flooding, and open cooling centers. Take advantage of local cooling centers. Hundreds are being built. Hundreds are being built.
An air conditioner on wheels rolls in, providing respite for those in need.
Not everyone can make it to a cooling center, so how do we bring the cooling center to them?
Hundreds are being built.
Since July 19th, the city of Phoenix has brought a bus and parked it here in the middle of downtown. Between 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., the bus, stocked with water and AC on full blast, welcomes about 120 visitors per day. The city is monitoring weather conditions every day too, and as long as the excessive heat and the need is there, the bus will remain a safe haven for those who need it.
The city's been sending one of the Valley Metro extended buses out here It sits out here for a couple hours so we can sit in them and stay cool, not sitting in the sun. Everybody wants to be out of the heat. They're in here relaxing, sleeping. It's just quieter than the library.
We would love it if Congress would give you the ability to declare heat a disaster. We think that could really save additional aid, and that would even more multiply the impact of the FEMA hazard mitigation assistance and the building resilient infrastructure, the BRIC programs, which are a good start to building long-term solutions, such as energy redundancy for cooling centers.
So one thing Phoenix is testing out right now is to try to mitigate the impacts of the heat. It's called Cool Corridor. So the city is planting more trees where shade is needed. Last year, Phoenix became the first city in the country to pledge to tree equity and initiatives to ensure all neighborhoods get the benefits trees provide.
Plant. On a sunny day at Cesar Chavez Park, Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego kicked off the planting of the city's first Cool Corridor.
We're going to look at the parts of our city where people are walking the most active, and try to put an eye towards equity and say we want to make more comfortable communities.
Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the United States and the fastest growing.
Nothing grows out here! Nothing's gonna grow out here! You see this? Huh? See this? This is sand. Yeah. It's sand. You know it's gonna be 100 years from now, huh? It's gonna be sand! We have deserts in America. We just don't live in them.
Grass is a big selling point.
It is, for sure.
Do you find that people who are looking to buy ask about water when they come out here?
Most just assume that everything's fine.
That there must be some...
Right, some magic thing that water's gonna come forever.
How important is the fact that you do have green grass to the growth of this community?
It's very important, especially for the families that come and live here. With all the golf courses here, we wouldn't have water to keep those going. So those would shut down. The parks would be just dirt. You'd have kids playing soccer on dirt. Nobody wants to do that. We need to have grass where kids can run around and play. They can't run around on the asphalt.
You're in the desert and you're building these homes, and it all requires a lot of water. So you have to bring in a pipeline to bring the water here, and maybe it'd be better just to not develop in the middle of the desert?
Sure, but then everyone still wants to be here. So what do? I guess we could say no more building. I've never heard of anyone doing that. That would be interesting to see what would happen when you just put a no-build moratorium out there. Who knows? Maybe that's what you do.
Zach Frankel is a conservationist who's been fighting the pipeline for years.
The Lake Powell pipeline is a disaster. It is the largest new water project being proposed in the entire Colorado River Basin today, home to 40 million people.
What would happen to the rest of water out west if this project is completed?
Some of the most populous parts of the American West in Nevada, California, and Arizona will be impacted by having their water supply diverted upstream of them.
Is it absurd to build a pipeline all the way down to the middle of the desert so that a community here can just grow and grow and grow?
So I guess our legislative and our local leaders have come and said, we want Washington County to grow. But the question is should people be having children, or should people be moving into western United States? That's a whole different debate. But here in Utah, considering those factors, our legislature came back and said, this is how we want to use our water.
La sequía es uno de los temas que más llama la atención en el reporte porque es la gran amenaza para el sur-oeste del país con un planeta más caliente. Se produce menos nieve en las montañas, lo que genera menos agua para las comunidades. Es algo que hemos visto en los últimos años en estados como Arizona y California, donde la sequía ha hecho que los agricultores abandonen sus cosechas porque no hay agua y que los ganaderos pierdan su ganado por la falta de agua y alimentos.
How Arizona has managed water as the climate grows hotter and drier. It's just the reality of less water in the Southwest.
Phoenix, the nation's 5th largest city, has started stage 1 of its water alert.
This is not a temporary situation. This might be our new future.
Who would be most affected?
All of us. You're not going to escape that much water. I mean, depending on how these cuts could play out, it could hit every citizen of this state, every farmer, every homeowner. It depends. I mean, granted, anybody that doesn't get Colorado River water, it probably won't hit them directly, but for those that get Colorado River water, yeah, it could potentially hit you.
Finite groundwater that would run out at some point, even if it was here for 100 years. What after that? Because that water is not replenished. And so once it's pumped, it's pretty much gone.
The challenge for growth, to a great degree, will be where will water for replenishment come from?
It seems like there's a plan to shift to more groundwater pumping in Arizona among the cities, among developers. And of course, those groundwater supplies are finite. And so there's a lot of discussion in Arizona about what sustainability looks like in the long term as the state receives less water from the Colorado River. Why did you suggest coming here to this area?
Because this is the epitome of irresponsible growth. It is growing on desert lands, raw desert lands, where there's no other water supply except groundwater. We have to look at our water as a whole. And it's really hard to separate one water source from another in terms of sustainability. So if the Colorado River dries up, that's 40% of the water supply of the valley. Right. So imagine this duplicated over and over and over again on both sides of that roadway. It feels that way to me, that there are no limits really, that we're just continuing to grow, and the growth is very much looks the same as all the other growth. Wall-to-wall houses. It's unsustainable. It's completely unsustainable. We do not have the water supplies to meet the needs of all this growth for what really needs to happen, which means forever. And so we've kind of turned a blind eye to the fact that we're not managing our groundwater. Well, it's the same thing that we did on the Colorado River. Either we do something about this now or we pay the consequences later. And we're paying the consequences now with the Colorado River because we didn't recognize and deal with the problem soon enough.
We do feel like we're taking a huge hit, and yet industry is, being encouraged to come in this area, which requires more housing, more people coming in our area, and we're in a serious drought. And so when you have cities asking for water conservation, pretty soon the asking is going to turn into requiring.
Water is the lifeblood of the Southwest.
It's just not producing enough water at the rate that we are taking it out of. This is why they can't launch boats. All of this would be underwater last year, all of it.
I drove past the canal and it was empty and I burst into tears. I was like, I just can't believe that we have no water.
We talk about the drought all the time, like, oh, it's dry. Well, this year, it's serious.
There will be hard decisions that have to be made.
You're gonna feel it in the grocery store. You're gonna feel higher prices on your clothing, on your food.
It does seem like it's a little lower than normal.
Never seen it like this before.